Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Calibrate Show. My name is Hunter France. Today we are doing the book of Revelation, chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, the first seal. So stick around after the bumper. All right, everyone, welcome back. And today we're just going to get right on into it. I'm going to hop us right in to the study. I'm going to read out of the CSB, and now I'm just going to start off by reading the first two verses in chapter 6, the book of Revelation. Again, the CSB. It says, "Then I saw the Lamb open one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures say with a loud voice, like thunder, 'Come.' I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. A crown was given to him, and he went out as a conqueror in order to conquer." Right off the bat, the first thing you do is you go and you Google the first seal. What does it mean? And you'll see a list of ideas and theories. The one I'm going to give to you today is the one that is bent on the idea. I'll harp on this more and more, but there's nothing new in the book of Revelation. It's thoroughly an Old Testament book. At least it's driven by the Old Testament and the book of prophecies, the prophets, all of it. That applies to the first seal of Revelation as well. Everything down to the symbol of the bow, but there's no arrows. You know, he has a bow, but there's no arrows. A crown being given to him. The color white, you know, he's coming out as a victorious king and conqueror, because the crown he's wearing is a victor's crown. It's a laurel wreath, something the emperors would wear in Rome. You know, and they would ride a white horse. It was like this victor's horse, victor's crown. It's not like the one that Jesus is seen wearing, a diadema. I won't get into the differences. Just know it's not the same type of crown. But yes, this is not Jesus. Because yes, Jesus comes back on a white horse. You read about it in the end of the book of Revelation. But this isn't Jesus in the first seal. This is actually the Antichrist. And I'm going to show you why. Look back here in verse 2 again. These things that I have highlighted in red, a little emboldened, I guess. I want you to keep these ideas in mind. A victorious rider, someone who's bent on conquest, a bow, and keep in mind that the bow is a symbol in the Bible. When God said, like he set his bow in the sky, he's looking at Noah and he puts the rainbow up there. It's a sign of God's promises, things like that. Well, this guy's holding a bow, but he has no arrows. Even the crown being given to him. Someone is giving him a crown. Keep all of this in mind, because what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the Old Testament. We're going to start in Daniel 7. And I'm going to run through this pretty quickly. And I think every time I put something on here, I'm going to highlight some of those same concepts in red. Deceit, anything from, keep this in mind too, an alliance, all of this stuff. You'll see what I mean. Stick around. Okay, so Daniel 7, verse 8, it's while I was considering the horn, suddenly another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. And suddenly in this horn there were eyes like the eyes of a human, and mouth, and it was speaking arrogantly. Boastfully, arrogantly, seeking self-worship. So I highlighted that one. Think self-idolatry, self-worship. Everyone knows the Antichrist. You see this later in the book of Revelation. If you've read it already, the Antichrist has got this like self-messianic complex. He wants to be worshipped. That's what the false prophet's there for, to get people to follow the Antichrist. Keep all of this in mind. That's just Daniel 7:8. Now, the little horn, a little one, and then coming up and uprooting the other 3. You read in throughout the book of Isaiah 17 or 19, it's woe to those who go to Egypt. He's given them over to a cruel master. This is the Assyrian invasion. They're going to take, as Micah would say, they're going to take on the invasion from the north, from the Assyrian. But the Assyrian will first invade Egypt. Or it'll either be simultaneously or first. You look at Daniel 11. It looks like first to me. King of the north, king of the south. You get to Daniel 21. In fact, let's go there because that's where we're going anyway. But before we do, we'll stop at Daniel 9 because I want to put this in front of you. Because Daniel 9 is, as I'm looking at my computer, not at you guys, Daniel 9 is something that's debated among theologians. They'll say this is about Jesus. Others will say it's about the Antichrist. I personally think it's in a way kind of both. Jesus does fulfill some of this, but ultimately Daniel 9, specifically 27, I'd say 26, 27, specifically is about the Antichrist, first and foremost. And this is why. Daniel 9 mentions the end. So right there in verse 26, the end will come with a flood, and until the end there will be war. Desolations are decreed. Flood, I forget how it's worded elsewhere, but this expression of a flood, an invasion like a flood, it's actually used a lot. You can think of a serpent swallowing up its prey, but it's also described as a flood sometimes. An invading enemy force militarily is invading, and they're sweeping over the land like a flood. But into 927, it says he will make a firm covenant. Other translations will say he will strengthen or confirm. And I actually think it's probably closer to confirm. But he either makes, confirms, or strengthens a covenant with the many, or with many. But in the middle of that week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and offering. And then it talks about right in there the abomination of desolation, which we actually get that first in Daniel 8. And then on into Daniel 11, which I'm about to go to now. So keep that in mind. Again, so he comes up. Oh, I think I failed to mention this. The little horns from Daniel 7 that are uprooted, these are nations that are being uprooted. That's why I went and I talked about Egypt being invaded. I forgot to tie that together. Excuse me. Ezekiel 38 gives you a lot of nations that come and join the Antichrist. But it's not like they all just join him. You can think of, again, like World War II. I used that as an example in the last video. After he invades Poland, Belgium joins him, and everyone's mad at Belgium. And he's like, hey, we can't defend ourselves. Do you want us to end up like Poland? And so they throw in with the guy. You'll see some of that in the Middle East in the days to come, I'm sure. But again, he makes a covenant. In the middle of it, he breaks it, and then it starts talking about the abomination of desolation. I'm not getting into a lot of that yet because this is about the early stages of the Antichrist, not necessarily the entire story. The next, when you start getting like the red horse, the black horse, we'll mention the abomination of desolation. Somewhere in there. In one of the next three horses. Stick around. All right, so let's go to Daniel 11 real quick, because this is one that I always want to come back to, because in Daniel 11, specifically verse 21, and to the end of Daniel 12, that is not just a great, it is the book of Revelation. It is the chronology, it's the events. There's a lot in there that follows the same path as the book of Revelation. The same thing. And it's sandwiched right in the middle, if you're just going by the way we've organized the books of the Bible in our age. Right in the middle is the Olivet Discourse. In Matthew 24, you can find this also in Mark and Luke. But in Matthew 24 and 25, Jesus gives the signs of the ends of the age, the conflict and everything. He talks about the abomination of desolation, but he follows the same chronology that's found in Daniel 11, 21, and to the end of Daniel 12. So I do love to come back to this. I'm going to read it for you guys here. A despised person will arise. Royal honors are not given to him, but he will come during a time of peace. And he will seize the kingdom by intrigue, by fancy words, flatteries. He's a politician. It talks about a flood of forces will be swept away before him. They will be broken, as well as the covenant prince. This is about the Antichrist. We haven't even mentioned the abomination of desolation yet. Here it is again. After an alliance is made with him. This is the same thing we just read in Daniel 9. A covenant with the many. After an alliance is made with him, he will act deceitfully. He will rise to power with a small nation. There it is, a little horn. During a time of peace, it reiterates it, he will come into the richest parts of the province and do it as fathers and predecessors never did. He will lavish plunder, loot, and wealth on his followers, and he will make plans against fortified cities, but only for a time. Starting in verse 25, it starts talking about him actually going into conflict. But right there into 24, Daniel 11, 21 to 24, is the epitome of the guy on the white horse in the first seal. It's this self-absorbed, arrogant, self-worship seeking guy with a messianic complex like Adolf Hitler had, who was insane and filled with satanic hatred towards God's covenant people, Israel and her offspring, the Christians. And he comes in during a time of peace. And he either makes or he confirms some sort of peace agreement, an alliance. The concept of this alliance, by the way, we mentioned it in Daniel 9, Daniel 11, but the concept really probably comes from Isaiah 28. If you go and you read 15 through 18 in that chapter, it talks about this covenant with death. And I think it's to verse 18, God says, your covenant with death will be annulled. This is an end times prophecy in Isaiah 28. You can go and read it on your own. But it's where this concept of Israel coming into an agreement with neighbors, expecting that it would protect them from an invading force, and it ultimately failing. It doesn't work out for them. And history repeats itself. Even the Bible would say there's nothing new under the sun. And it says in another place something along the lines of history repeating itself. I'll put it down below so you can go look at it. But there is a sense that in the end times, Israel will do this again. And it's not that they're not even allowed to enter into wise diplomacy. They're allowed to make agreements. They're allowed to make friends. They're allowed to be friendly. But there's this violation of the Mosaic covenant and the Mosaic law. It's like don't enter into covenants with them in these marriages. Don't put these things before God. It's the same thing as God giving you a house. Nothing you have in this life should take the place of him ultimately, because all the stuff in the world is temporary, as we know, and we'll come to this at the end of this book. The end of the age, the judgment, and the recreation, or the not the reimagining, the regeneration of all things, our bodies, our souls, our minds, our hearts, and the world around us, the universe will all be renewed, restored, cleansed of all imperfection. It'll be awesome. But until we get there, we have to get through this first. So that's Daniel 11:24. We can also look to 1 Thessalonians 5:3. I just put that right there below, where he talks about as soon as they say peace and security, then sudden destruction comes on them. All these themes are the same themes repeating themselves over and over. That's why I've been saying the book of Revelation is not new. These are themes repeating themselves. In Revelation 6:1-2, the first seal, John is being given a vision of the same story. And just for our preterist brothers and sisters, Daniel 11:21 to the end of Daniel 12 happens before Antiochus Epiphanes, and it all comes together, and it looks like Ezekiel 38 lands when you take the map, and the ones that were not antagonistic with Israel and the ones who were antagonistic with Israel coming from the north. And you look at Antiochus Epiphanes, and they line up. They line up today as well, which is really cool. I might try to steal this map. It wouldn't be a map I created. I found a map, and I might just put it up there. But those dynamics are at play again today. So just to say, again, history repeats itself, and that's why it's important to know. So I might actually, I think I will bring that up in the next video. I won't do that here. But in Jesus' time, he goes through, again, I said this before, the same chronology in the Olivet Discourse, but he places it in the future, and this is a couple hundred years after Antiochus Epiphanes. Then if you think 70 AD fulfills all of the prophecy, well, then you have to take Ezekiel 38 into account, which was not at play during 70 AD. And when John wrote this, being given this vision of the rider on the white horse, which is the same story through the rest of this prophecy, it's the same story being told again. The rider on the white horse is being placed yet again in the future, post 70 AD. So let's take a look at this one more time. We'll go through the symbolism in verse 2 and all those themes that we just went through. Just remember them, okay? So he's coming out like a rider on a white horse. He's coming to a people that are small, and they will see him as a victor. He is a victorious conqueror, dictator, and king with a self-messianic worship. I didn't mention, but in Daniel, it talks about him having a god, and he does things for this god. And they set up the abomination of desolation for this god. So we have this known about it from previous prophecies as well. So him coming out on a white horse with a laurel wreath, a victor's crown, shouldn't surprise us that he would come out like that. He is holding a bow that doesn't, there's no mention of arrows in the CSB. Others, I've read somewhere where it says a bow with no arrows. It specifies it. But here it just says he just has a bow. And the bow represents covenant, but without the arrows, there's really nothing to it. It's just a bow. You can't fire an arrow if you have no arrow. So there's nothing behind it. This covenant that's made with him, but yet he acts deceitfully. He has a crown given to him. He comes up as a politician, seizes the kingdom by intrigue. He's uses lies, manipulating the laws, people's emotion. He uses statecraft. He rises to power, starts off with a small group. Again, think Adolf Hitler in World War II. Starts off with a small group that grows into something much bigger. And then he uproots 3. Again, he's going out as a victor, as a conqueror bent on conquest. And so now 3 little horns are being uprooted before him. So he will take over some land. Even now, one of the issues of Turkey and why they're such an interesting player in NATO is they have openly stated over the last few years that they want to bring back the Islamic Caliphate, which would be basically the Ottoman Empire. They're this neo-Ottoman aspirations that Erdogan and his regime very much have, and that's just something that I think you should pay attention to. If you're watching Bible prophecy, pay attention to that region. Pay attention to Turkey. Pay attention to that region. But I would encourage you, just put a boundary for yourself, okay? Limit your exposure to the news, because even in the news, even if you're looking in those areas, you're likely not seeing the truth. The news is kind of a mess right now, and I think everyone knows that. This being an election year, you're seeing the worst of it. Going out as a rider to conquer, that pretty much covers everything here. We're going to get into the next, I'll either do the second and third seal in one video, or I'll separate them. We'll see what it comes down to when I start really breaking that video down. But that's all for the first seal today. I hope I can show you, or I hope you learned where all of the Old Testament backdrop is to the first seal, how easy it is to start recognizing what it's talking about. It is the same story. Keep Ezekiel 38 in mind as we go further in this study. It tells you the region, what to look for. It tells you the lands, North Africa, Middle East, Asia Minor. Keep the Old Testament prophets. Go back and read Daniel 11. Go to verse 21 and go and read all of it to the end of Daniel 12. Beautiful prophecy, but it's also tough. And then go read Matthew 24 and 25. And then we'll come back to this. I hope to see you there. Love you guys. Maranatha. And come on back.